I never thought I'd watch my husband marry my own sister. Yet there I was, standing in the shadows of a church decorated with roses and gold ribbons, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Derek Callahan, the man I once trusted with my whole soul, was sliding a ring onto Brielle's trembling hand. My sister. My blood. They looked radiant, as if the world had handed them everything. Guests whispered about how beautiful the couple looked, how perfect they seemed. No one noticed the woman in the back, clutching a small white box tied with a crimson ribbon. That box was my gift. A gift that would end them both. When the priest declared them husband and wife, applause erupted. I saw Derek glance at Brielle with smug triumph, as if betraying me had been his greatest victory. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the power I held in that little box. I left it carefully on their gift table, blending among the glittering packages and envelopes stuffed with cash. But mine wasn't money. Mine wasn't silver or china. Mine was truth. The truth they thought would stay buried forever. As I slipped out of the church before they even cut the cake, I knew the moment they opened my wedding gift, their smiles would vanish. Their world would shatter. Tell me, what would you do if the two people you trusted most destroyed you, then stood laughing at the altar? My name is Elena Monroe, and if you'd met me 2 years ago, you'd never have guessed how broken I'd become. Back then, I had everything I thought I ever wanted, a husband who held my hand through the hardest nights, a sister who I believed would stand by me no matter what, and parents who seemed proud of the woman I was becoming. But life has a cruel way of tearing the ground from under your feet. It started with small cracks. Derek worked late, claiming he was drowning in deadlines. Brielle, always the golden child, visited me often, checking in, asking questions about my marriage that felt a little too sharp. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, she was my sister. She'd never crossed that line. Still, something about the way she lingered when Derek was around made my stomach twist. She laughed at his jokes louder than anyone else. She brushed his sleeve like it was an accident. Derek, of course, acted like he didn't notice. But I noticed. And every night I lay awake, whispering to myself, "You're being paranoid. They love you. They'd never betray you." I was wrong. One evening, after a charity gala, I returned home early. I thought I'd surprise Derek. Instead, I found the surprise waiting for me. My sister's heels by the door. Her scarf draped over the couch. Laughter echoing from the bedroom. When I opened the door, it was like the air was ripped from my lungs. Brielle was in my bed, her lipstick smeared across Derek's skin. They froze when they saw me. Brielle's face went pale, but Derek didn't even flinch. He had the audacity to look me in the eyes and say, "Elena, you were never enough for me." "She is." Those words carved into my heart deeper than any knife. The days that followed blurred into a haze of shame and disbelief. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. The betrayal was too heavy to carry. Friends whispered behind my back, some blaming me for not keeping my husband happy, others pitying me like I was some tragic character in a story no one wanted to hear again. And Brielle, she didn't stop. She flaunted their relationship openly. She posted pictures, hand in hand with the man who once promised me forever. She smiled like she'd won some grand prize. My parents? They didn't know where to stand. They told me to be the bigger person, as if swallowing betrayal was a noble act. But I wasn't noble anymore. I was angry. Each time I saw Brielle's smug face on social media, each time Derek showed up at family gatherings with his arm around her, my rage grew stronger. I thought about all the secrets I carried, things Derek had hidden, lies Brielle had spun, and realized I held something they didn't. I held the truth. They thought they had buried it so deep no one would ever uncover it. But I had proof. Proof of Derek's crimes. Proof of Brielle's betrayals that went far beyond stealing my husband. That's when the idea came to me. If they wanted to play house, if they wanted to stand in front of the world as husband and wife, I'd let them. I'd even let them have their perfect wedding day. Because what better moment to tear down their little empire than the very moment they believed they had won everything? That was when I began planning my gift. A gift wrapped not in love, but in justice. A gift that would expose them in front of everyone who thought their love story was something to admire. And when the day finally came, when I stood in the shadows of their wedding, I didn't feel like the broken woman they had tried to destroy. I felt powerful. Because I knew what was waiting for them once they opened that little white box. The week of their wedding arrived like a storm I had been silently waiting for. Every detail of their celebration was flaunted across social media, Brielle in her designer gown fittings, Derek boasting about the love of his life, friends gushing in the comments. I watched quietly. Not a word, not a single post from me. They thought I was hiding in shame, licking my wounds. They had no idea I was planning the most unforgettable moment of their lives. I had always been meticulous. Derek used to tease me about my habit of saving receipts, keeping copies of documents, backing up files. But that habit became my weapon. Hidden in my desk drawers were folders Derek thought I'd never touch. Proof of his financial fraud, shady business dealings, and debts he'd hidden behind my name. Bank statements. Fake signatures. Evidence strong enough to ruin him in court. And Brielle? She wasn't innocent either. Before Derek, she'd been involved with another man, one she had blackmailed to pay her way through grad school. I had the text messages, the recorded calls. She thought I'd deleted them years ago. She was wrong. Piece by piece, I gathered everything. I didn't scream, I didn't confront. I simply crafted my plan. The gift itself was simple, a small, elegant white box tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a USB drive containing every secret, every document, every piece of proof. On top, I placed a handwritten note that read, "Congratulations. May your marriage be built on truth, unlike your affair." But the brilliance wasn't just in the gift. It was in how it would be delivered. I contacted the wedding planner, pretending to be a florist with a special delivery for the bride and groom. A well-timed bribe ensured the package would be placed on their gift table, labeled "From Elena." Everyone would see it. Everyone would know it was from me. The night before the wedding, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at that little box on my table. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. For months, I had been the victim, mocked, betrayed, discarded. But tomorrow, I would become something else entirely. On the morning of the wedding, I dressed simply, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I didn't plan to sit in the audience. No, my place was in the shadows, watching quietly as their world collapsed. The venue was breathtaking, crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, a string quartet playing softly. Guests arrived in shimmering gowns and tailored suits, all buzzing with excitement. Brielle looked radiant in her lace gown, glowing like a woman who believed she had stolen happiness forever. Derek stood tall in his tuxedo, smug and confident, shaking hands as if he were the king of the day. They didn't notice the box placed neatly among the gold-wrapped gifts. The ceremony passed without a hitch. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, kisses sealed promises. Laughter and applause filled the hall. For a moment, it almost looked like a perfect wedding. Almost. Then came the reception. Champagne glasses clinked, music swelled, and guests circled the gift table, admiring the pile of presents. When the time came for the bride and groom to open a few special gifts, the planner, just as I arranged, handed them my box first. I leaned against the far wall, hidden in the crowd, my heart pounding as Brielle's delicate fingers untied the ribbon. Derek smirked when he saw my name on the card. Of course she had to make this about her, he muttered loud enough for those near him to hear. But his smirk faded the moment the note slipped into his hands. His eyes scanned the words, and the color drained from his face. Brielle frowned. "What is it?" she asked, grabbing the USB. She waved it carelessly, trying to laugh it off. But Derek's expression betrayed him, fear, raw and unfiltered. Guests began to murmur. Phones were raised. People leaned in. The whisper spread like wildfire. "What's on it?" someone asked. And then, like clockwork, the hotel projector lit up. Because I hadn't just given them the USB. I had arranged for it to connect directly to the system, timed perfectly to play. On the giant screen behind the couple, Derek's bank fraud flashed first: spreadsheets, forged signatures, screenshots of his emails. Gasps filled the room. Then came Brielle's turn, her blackmail messages, her lies, her dirty secrets, all displayed before the very friends and family she had fooled for years. Brielle's bouquet fell to the ground. Derek lunged toward the projector, shouting, but it was too late. The evidence rolled on, unstoppable. Their wedding wasn't just ruined. Their reputations, their shiny new marriage, their carefully built lies, everything crumbled in front of hundreds of witnesses. And I walked out quietly, unnoticed, a calm smile on my face. For the first time in months, I could breathe. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. The first weeks after their wedding were like knives pressed against my skin. Every time I opened social media, there they were, smiling in matching outfits, sipping champagne on some balcony, flashing diamond rings at the camera. The captions were even worse. "Found my true soulmate. Some things are meant to be." Brielle was shameless. She didn't just steal my husband, she flaunted it like a trophy. Derek, on the other hand, carried himself like a man who had conquered. His grin in every photo said, "I won, and she lost." I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because silence has weight. It builds pressure. And I wanted that pressure to explode in their perfect little lives. But silence didn't stop the whispers. At the grocery store, I heard women whispering behind their carts. "Isn't that Elena? The one whose sister married her husband?" I pretended not to hear, but inside, I burned. At night, I replayed every moment with Derek, his late nights at work, the sudden excuses to visit Brielle, the strange distance that grew between us months before the wedding. All the signs had been there, and I had ignored them. Love makes fools of us all. Then came the final insult. One morning, my mother called me. Her voice carried that forced cheer she used whenever she was about to deliver bad news. "Elena, honey. Derek and Brielle want to host Thanksgiving this year. They want the whole family together. Isn't that wonderful?" I almost dropped the phone. My own family, sitting at their table, pretending nothing had happened? That was when something inside me hardened. No more tears. No more broken nights. If they wanted to play house, let them. But I would deliver something that no one could ignore. I spent the following weeks digging. Old files, phone bills, emails, things I had buried because I didn't want to face the truth. The truth of Derek's lies. His hidden deals. The money he moved in secret. And then, tucked deep in a folder he thought I'd never find, I discovered it: proof. Proof so damning it could ruin not just his marriage, but his career, his reputation, his entire life. That was when the idea came to me. Not to confront him. Not to scream in his face or demand answers he would never give. No. My revenge had to cut deeper. It had to be timed. Precise. Public. And what better stage than their wedding day? I kept quiet as the months rolled on, listening to Brielle brag about her fairy tale romance, watching my parents smile as though nothing had been stolen from me. I smiled too, because by then, I knew something they didn't. The day they said I do, I would give them something neither of them could ever forget. A gift that would poison their happiness. The closer the wedding came, the calmer I felt. Pain had burned out of me, leaving something sharper: focus. I bought a small, elegant box. White satin with a blood-red ribbon. Inside, I placed the documents. Every secret Derek had buried. Every lie Brielle had helped cover. And one photo, proof of their betrayal before the world knew. On the outside, it looked like any other wedding gift. But inside, it was the end of their story. As the church bells rang and I stepped into the shadows of the ceremony, I knew, today, the game would change. The church smelled of roses and candles, soft music floating through the air. Guests whispered about how beautiful the bride looked, how handsome the groom was. They called it a perfect wedding. I didn't sit among them. I stood in the back, unseen, my face hidden beneath a wide black hat. No one noticed me. No one ever noticed the one who'd been betrayed. Brielle glided down the aisle in white satin, her veil shimmering like a halo. Derek's smile was wide, triumphant. Together, they looked like royalty. I almost laughed. They had built their kingdom on lies, and kingdoms built on lies always fall. When the vows ended and applause filled the church, I slipped the gift into the pile at the reception hall. A small, elegant box wrapped in satin and ribbon. It didn't call attention to itself, it waited, patient, deadly. The celebration stretched on into the night. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and Brielle floated through the room like she had finally won everything she ever wanted. Derek stood by her side, chest puffed, drinking too much, as if he'd conquered the world. I watched from a corner, silent, calm. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. This wasn't revenge anymore, it was justice. Finally, the moment came. They sat together at the head table, surrounded by flowers and silverware, and began opening the wedding gifts. Laughter followed each package. China sets, checks and envelopes, framed photos, little luxuries. Then Derek reached for mine. He tore the ribbon casually, smiling as if expecting another toaster. But when he lifted the lid, the smile faltered. His fingers froze on the edge of the box. Inside, neatly arranged, were the papers. Bank transfers. Emails. Signed documents. Proof of the deals he thought no one knew about. And tucked on top, a photograph, Derek and Brielle, locked in an embrace, dated months before my divorce. The room went quiet. Brielle leaned forward, curiosity turning to horror as she saw what lay inside. Her face drained of color. "What is this?" she whispered, though her voice carried across the hall. Guests leaned in, murmuring. Derek shoved the papers back into the box, his hands trembling. "Nothing. It's nothing." But it was too late. One of Brielle's bridesmaids had already picked up a paper that slipped out. She read the numbers, her eyes widening. "These are bank statements?" Whispers spread like wildfire. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Someone gasped. Brielle snatched the photo, her voice breaking. This was before the divorce. "You told me." Her words cracked in the middle, splintering under the weight of the truth. Derek stood, his face red, veins rising in his neck. "Stop. Just stop," he shouted, but his voice only fueled the fire. Guests were already snapping photos, recording videos. His downfall was being broadcast before he could bury it. Brielle's hand shook as she shoved the box back at him. "You said we were meant to be. You said she didn't matter. But you were lying to me, too, weren't you?" For the first time that night, Derek looked cornered. Like an animal caught in a trap. Brielle, it's not what it looks like." But she was already pulling off her wedding ring, tears streaking her mascara. "It looks exactly like what it is. You used me. You lied to me. You destroyed her life and then mine." Her voice broke into sobs, loud enough for the whole hall to hear. And I, quiet, invisible in the corner, finally allowed myself to smile. Because I knew this was only the beginning. By morning, their photos would be all over social media. Not of their vows, not of their first dance, but of the moment their perfect wedding turned to ashes. The gift had done its work. The wedding hall erupted into chaos. Guests who only moments earlier were clapping and dancing now stood in stunned silence, whispering to one another like a jury passing judgment. Brielle's bouquet slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The petals scattered, trampled beneath expensive shoes as people stepped back, as though distance could shield them from the scandal unraveling before their eyes. "Tell me it's not true, Derek." Brielle screamed, clutching the papers against her chest. Her voice cracked, echoing against the tall ceilings. He reached for her, desperate, but she shoved him back so hard his chair toppled. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Derek's parents buried their faces in their hands. Brielle's bridesmaids tried to pull her aside, but she shook them off, her mascara running in black streaks. Phones were everywhere now, guests recording, whispering, some even laughing at the irony of it all. The once perfect couple was falling apart in real time, and nobody was going to forget it. "You told me she didn't matter." Brielle cried, her words like shards of glass. "You swore you loved me. But you were planning everything behind my back." Derek tried to steady himself, his voice breaking under the weight of his own desperation. "Brielle, I did this for us. I wanted to protect us." "Protect us?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You destroyed her life and now you've destroyed mine. This marriage is over before it's even started." The hall fell silent again, stunned by the weight of her words. Brielle ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at his chest. It clinked against the floor, spinning until it lay still, unnoticed. Derek's face crumpled, his arrogance gone. He fell to his knees, pleading, his voice hoarse. "Please. Brielle, don't do this. We can fix it." But Brielle didn't even look at him. She turned, shoulders shaking, and walked out of the hall, her veil dragging like a trail of broken promises. The crowd parted for her, watching in hushed awe as the bride fled her own wedding. Cameras followed. Whispers turned to shouts. And Derek, alone, humiliated, was left clutching the box, the truth spilling from his hands. I slipped out quietly, unnoticed, my hat tilted low. No one saw me leave, and that was how I wanted it. The revenge wasn't about being seen, it was about making sure they could never hide again. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. The music had stopped, replaced by shouts and chaos inside the hall. But out here, the world felt still, peaceful. I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement. Each step was lighter than the last. For years, I had carried the weight of betrayal, the lies, the humiliation, the nights I cried alone. But tonight, I wasn't the broken one anymore. They were. I glanced back once at the glowing windows of the hall. Shadows moved inside, angry, panicked, desperate. Their story was over. And mine? Mine was just beginning. I drove away from the wedding slowly, the sound of my tires humming against the quiet road. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the heaviness of betrayal pressing on my chest. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the woman who had been abandoned by her husband or betrayed by her own sister. I was free. In the silence of my car, memories flickered, nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong, moments when Brielle smirked behind my back, and Derek's hollow promises of love. For so long, I had carried their choices like chains. But tonight, I had set those chains down. Revenge, people say, doesn't heal. Maybe they're right. But sometimes revenge isn't about hurting, it's about truth. About making sure the people who broke you are finally seen for who they are. As I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment, watching the sky grow pale with the first light of dawn. My hands no longer shook. My heart no longer raced. For the first time, the future didn't terrify me. I realized something important that night: family isn't always blood, and love isn't always trust. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who bury the deepest knives. And sometimes, walking away is the strongest form of survival. Brielle and Derek's story ended in that hall, with shattered vows and broken pride. Mine, however, was far from over. I had my own life to rebuild, a life where I no longer existed in their shadows. And maybe one day, I'll love again. Not because I need someone to save me, but because I know now that I am strong enough to stand alone. When I closed my front door behind me, a sense of peace washed over me. The past was over. Their lies were theirs to live with now. As for me, I finally had my freedom back. And that was the best gift I could have given myself.